My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I've been perfecting the art of lying for the past 7 years. Not small lies, not white lies, but the kind of elaborate deception that builds entire false realities. The kind that makes neighbors wave cheerfully from their manicured lawns while I smile back, knowing they have no idea what happens behind my pristine white door. This morning started like every other. Michael left for work at 7:15 sharp, his cologne lingering in the hallway like a poisonous cloud. He kissed my forehead, the same spot he'd grabbed and slammed against the kitchen counter just hours before, when I'd made the unforgivable mistake of burning his eggs. The bruise is hidden now, concealed beneath layers of expensive concealer that I've learned to apply with professional precision. "Have a wonderful day, darling," he said, his voice honey-sweet, the same voice that had whispered threats into my ear in the darkness, the same voice that promised consequences if I ever thought about leaving, about telling anyone, about being anything other than the perfect wife he'd molded me to become. I watched him drive away in his gleaming BMW, waiting until the sound of the engine completely faded before allowing my shoulders to drop, before letting the mask slip for just a moment. These precious hours while he's gone are the only time I can breathe, the only time I can think clearly enough to remember who I used to be before I became this hollow version of myself. The phone rang almost immediately, making me jump. It was Margaret from next door, her voice bright and cheerful. "Sarah, honey, how are you this morning?" I saw Michael leave for work. Such a devoted husband, always so well dressed and polite. "You're so lucky to have found such a gem." Lucky, the word twisted in my stomach like a knife. If only she knew that her gem of a man had spent the previous evening systematically destroying my self-worth, piece by carefully calculated piece. If only she knew that his politeness was a performance, his devotion a cage. Yes, I'm very blessed, I managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. This conversation, like hundreds of others, was just another scene in the elaborate play we perform daily. The happy couple, the enviable marriage, the perfect suburban life. I was wondering if you'd like to join me for coffee this afternoon. That new cafe downtown has the most divine pastries, and I thought we could catch up. As if there was anything real to catch up on. As if I could tell her that I spent most of my time calculating how to avoid triggering Michael's rage, mapping out the safest paths through our house, memorizing which topics of conversation were forbidden territories. That sounds lovely, Margaret, but I have so much to do around the house today. You know how it is, she laughed knowingly. Of course, dear. Michael does like things kept just so, doesn't he? Such attention to detail. Richard could learn a thing or two from him about maintaining standards. Another word that made my skin crawl. Michael's standards were impossible moving targets, designed to ensure I could never quite meet them, never quite earn the peace I desperately craved. Today the house was spotless, but tomorrow he'd find dust in places I'd never thought to look. Today dinner would be perfect, but tomorrow the seasoning would be wrong, or the presentation inadequate, or I'd served it 30 seconds too late. After hanging up, I walked through our house, seeing it through Margaret's eyes. She saw elegant furniture, fresh flowers, gleaming surfaces. She saw success, stability, the American dream realized. She didn't see the careful choreography required to maintain this illusion. The way I moved through these rooms like a ghost, afraid to disturb anything, afraid to exist too loudly in the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, cataloging the damage. The bruise on my forehead was almost invisible now. The finger-shaped marks on my upper arms would fade in a few days. The cut on my lower lip from last week was nearly healed. I'd become an expert at damage assessment, at predicting healing times, at strategic wardrobe choices, but it was my eyes that told the real story. Once bright and full of dreams, they'd become dull, hollow things. Empty windows in a house where no one lived anymore. Sometimes I wondered if this was what dying looked like from the inside. This gradual fading, this slow erasure of everything I'd once been. Asterisk the doorbell rang at exactly 10:30, jolting me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, maybe my age, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. She held a small potted plant in her hands. "Hi, I'm Elena Rodriguez. I just moved into the blue house on the corner." Her voice was warm, genuine in a way that made me immediately suspicious. In my world, kindness always came with a price. I wanted to introduce myself to the neighborhood. I opened the door wider, slipping automatically into my performance mode. "How wonderful, I'm Sarah Chen. Welcome to Maple Street." "It's such a lovely neighborhood." Elena's smile widened. "Thank you." Everyone seems so friendly. The gentleman across the street, Richard, he told me you and your husband are the couple to know around here. Said you two are the picture of happiness. The picture of happiness, if only photographs could scream. That's very kind of him to say. I accepted the plant, a small succulent in a hand-painted pot. "This is beautiful. You didn't have to do this." "I paint them myself. It's sort of a hobby." Elena's eyes lit up when she talked about her art. I tried to remember the last time my eyes have looked like that, bright with passion for something, anything. I was wondering, do you know of any good places around here to set up an easel? I love painting outdoors. There's a lovely park about 10 minutes away, Willow Creek Park, very peaceful. The words came automatically, but something about Elena's enthusiasm stirred something deep inside me, something I'd thought was long dead. Perfect. Maybe you'd like to join me sometime? I could teach you some basics if you're interested. The offer hung in the air between us, tempting and terrifying. When was the last time I'd done something just for myself? When was the last time I'd spent time with another woman without calculating how every word, every gesture might be reported back to Michael? That's very sweet of you, but I'm quite busy with maintaining the house and supporting my husband's career. The rehearsed response rolled off my tongue, but I saw something flicker in Elena's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or suspicion, of course. Well, the offer stands if you ever find yourself with some free time. She paused, studying my face with an intensity that made me want to step back. You have beautiful bone structure. You'd be a wonderful subject to paint. No one had called me beautiful in years. Michael used to in the beginning, but those compliments had gradually transformed into criticisms, each one chipping away at my confidence until I could barely look at myself in mirrors without seeing flaws. After Elena left, I found myself standing in the kitchen, still holding the succulent. The little plant seemed almost alien in our sterile house, a splash of life in a place that felt more like a museum. Michael hated plants, said they were messy, unpredictable. He preferred cut flowers that could be disposed of before they wilted, before they became imperfect. I placed the succulent on the windowsill above the sink, where it caught the morning light. For a moment, I imagined what it would be like to have a house full of living things, to nurture something and watch it grow instead of constantly managing decline and damage. The morning passed slowly. I cleaned rooms that were already spotless, organized closets that were already perfectly arranged, prepared lunch I had no appetite for. This was my routine, my prison disguised as domesticity. Every task performed with the precision of someone who knew that any mistake, no matter how small, would have consequences. At noon, Michael called to check in. He always called at noon. "How's your day, darling?" "Wonderful." The new neighbor stopped by to introduce herself. Elena Rodriguez. She moved into the blue house on the corner. "What did you tell her about us?" The question was casual, but I heard the edge underneath. Everything was a test with Michael, every interaction a potential source of embarrassment or exposure. Nothing specific. Just that we're happy here in the neighborhood. Good. We don't need strangers knowing our business. His voice softened, became almost loving. You know, I only want to protect you, Sarah. The world can be cruel to sensitive people like you. Sensitive. His favorite word for me, wielded like a weapon. I was too sensitive to handle the truth about his work stress. Too sensitive to understand why he sometimes lost his temper. Too sensitive to survive without his protection and guidance. I know, Michael. I'm grateful for everything you do for me. That's my girl. I'll be home at 6:30. Let's have that salmon you bought yesterday. And Sarah, make sure you wear the blue dress tonight, the one I bought you last month. The blue dress. The one with long sleeves that covered my arms completely. The one with the high neckline that concealed any marks. He'd chosen it specifically for its coverage, though he'd presented it as a gift, as evidence of his thoughtfulness and good taste. Asterisk. After the call ended, I stood motionless in the kitchen, phone still in my hand. The blue dress hung in our bedroom closet like a shroud, waiting. How many times had I worn it to cover evidence of his love? How many dinner parties and social gatherings had I attended, smiling and chatting while fabric concealed the truth about my marriage? I walked to the window and stared at Elena's house. She was in her front yard now, setting up what looked like an easel. Even from this distance, I could see the freedom in her movements, the unself-conscious way she moved through space. When was the last time I'd moved like that? When was the last time I'd done anything without calculating its potential consequences? The succulent caught my eye again, its thick leaves already turning toward the sunlight. Such a simple thing. Following its nature, seeking what it needed to survive. I envied that plant its simplicity, its instinctive knowledge of what was good for it. The afternoon dragged on with oppressive slowness. I prepared the salmon, selecting each herb with microscopic precision. Michael preferred his food seasoned exactly to his specifications, no deviation allowed. Too much salt, and he'd accuse me of trying to sabotage his health. Too little, and I was careless, thoughtless about his preferences. At 4 o'clock, I began getting ready, though Michael wouldn't be home for hours. The blue dress first, its fabric soft against my skin, but somehow feeling like armor. Then makeup, carefully applied to create the illusion of health, of happiness. Foundation to even out my complexion. Concealer for any remaining shadows. Lipstick, in the shade Michael preferred, not too bold, not too subtle. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, practicing my smile. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, perfectly groomed and utterly empty. She looked like someone who should be happy, someone who had everything she could want. She looked like a lie. The sound of a car door slamming made my blood freeze. 6:15. Michael was early. I rushed to the kitchen, checking everything one final time. Salmon perfectly seasoned, vegetables cut to identical sizes, wine decanted. And breathing. The table set with our good china, candles lit but not yet dripping wax. Everything perfect, everything exactly as he expected it to be. Sarah, I'm home. His voice echoed through the house, and I felt my body respond with familiar tension. Shoulders up, breath shallow, every muscle coiled for fight or flight, even though I'd never been allowed to do either. In the kitchen, darling. Dinner's almost ready. He appeared in the doorway, still in his expensive suit, his smile warm and loving. To anyone watching, he looked like a devoted husband coming home to his beloved wife. And maybe, in his twisted way, that's what he thought he was. You look beautiful in that dress. Blue is definitely your color. He crossed the room and kissed my cheek, his lips lingering just long enough to whisper, though you could have touched up your lipstick before I got home. My hand flew automatically to my lips. The lipstick looked perfect to me, but Michael's eyes saw flaws I could never anticipate. I'm sorry. I'll fix it right now. No need. We're eating at home tonight. His tone was generous, forgiving, as if he were doing me a tremendous favor by overlooking my failure. How was your day? Tell me about this new neighbor. I served the salmon while recounting my brief interaction with Elena, carefully editing out anything that might displease him. I didn't mention her art, her invitation, the way her eyes had seemed to see too much. I presented Elena as harmless, forgettable, nothing to concern him with. Sounds like another bored housewife looking for drama, he said, cutting his salmon. With surgical precision. I hope you made it clear that we value our privacy. Of course. Good. We don't need complications. He chewed thoughtfully, and I held my breath, waiting for his verdict on the meal. This is delicious, Sarah. You've outdone yourself. Relief flooded through me, so intense it was almost painful. A successful dinner meant a peaceful evening, maybe even kindness. These small victories had become the highlights of my existence, moments of reprieve in an otherwise endless storm. I'm glad you like it. I do, and I have good news to share. His smile broadened, and I felt my stomach clench. Michael's good news often meant changes, disruptions to the careful routines that kept me safe. I've been promoted, senior partner, effective immediately. That's wonderful, Michael. You've worked so hard for this. I have, and now I'll be working even harder. Longer days, more travel, bigger clients. He reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb stroking across my knuckles. Which means I'll need you to be even more supportive, even more understanding when I'm under pressure. Even more understanding. Code for even more accepting of his rages, his demands, his need to control every aspect of our lives. Even more. Willing to absorb his stress and transform it into dinner parties and social obligations and perfect performances of marital bliss. That night, lying in bed beside Michael's sleeping form, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the woman I'd been before him. Sarah Chen, age 27, fresh out of graduate school with a master's in social work. I'd wanted to help people to make a difference in the world. I'd been idealistic, passionate, full of plans and dreams. That woman seemed like a character from someone else's story now. Someone I'd read about but never actually been. How had I become this hollow version of myself? When had I stopped fighting and started surviving? It had been gradual, so subtle that I hadn't recognized what was happening until it was too late. The first time Michael raised his voice, he'd apologized profusely, blamed work stress, bought me flowers, and promised it would never happen again. The first time he'd grabbed my arm too tightly, leaving fingerprint bruises. He'd cried, begged my forgiveness, made me feel guilty for upsetting him. The gaslighting had been masterful. Every incident became my fault somehow. I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too quick to misinterpret his actions. He was under so much pressure at work, carrying so much responsibility. All he needed was a supportive wife who understood the burdens he carried. Slowly, systematically, he'd isolated me from friends, family, any support system that might have helped me see the truth. My job became a source of conflict. Why did I need to work when he made enough to support us both? Wasn't our marriage more important than my career? Didn't I want to focus on building our life together? By the time I realized what was happening, I was completely dependent on him financially, emotionally, socially. He'd become my entire world, and he wielded that power with surgical precision. The next morning brought another perfect performance. Michael kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, reminded me to pick up his dry cleaning. I smiled and waved from the doorway, playing the devoted wife for any neighbors who might be watching. But as soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I found myself walking toward the front window, looking for signs of life at Elena's house. Her car was gone, but I could see painting supplies on her front porch, evidence of an evening spent creating something beautiful. The succulent on my windowsill had grown overnight, its leaves slightly fuller, reaching more confidently toward the light. Such a small change, almost imperceptible, but somehow significant. Growth was possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Unknown number. Hello? Hi, is this Sarah? This is Elena, your new neighbor. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the neighborhood directory. My heart began racing. Michael hated unexpected calls, unexpected disruptions to the routine. Hi, Elena. Is everything all right? Everything's fine. I was actually calling to invite you to something. There's a women's art group that meets at the community center every Thursday morning. Very informal, just a group of us who like to paint and chat. I thought you might enjoy it. An art group. Women gathering to create things, to talk freely, to exist without performance or pretense. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. That sounds lovely, but I'm not really artistic. I wouldn't want to embarrass myself. Trust me, there's no judgment. Half the women there had never held a paintbrush before joining. It's more about the community than the art, though the art is fun too. Community. Another word that had been systematically removed from my vocabulary. Michael preferred us to be self-sufficient, to need only each other. Dependence on him was encouraged, but connections with others were complications. I'd love to, but I'm quite busy with household responsibilities. Of course, I understand. Elena's voice was gentle, but I detected something else underneath. Recognition, perhaps. The offer stands if you ever find yourself with some free time. We meet at 10 on Thursdays. No pressure, just women supporting women. After she hung up, I sat in the silence of my perfect house, thinking about women supporting. Women. When was the last time I'd been supported by anyone other than Michael? When was the last time I'd had a conversation that wasn't calculated, performed, carefully managed? I walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. Every object perfectly placed, every surface gleaming, every detail conforming to Michael's vision of how we should live. This wasn't a home. It was a stage set designed to support the illusion of our happiness dot in the bathroom. I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. The woman looking back at me was flawlessly groomed, expensively dressed, completely miserable. She was a work of art herself, carefully crafted to meet someone else's specifications, with no regard for what she might want or need or dream of becoming. I thought about Elena's paintings, created from her own vision, expressing her own truth. I thought about the art group, women gathering to create freely, to support each other's growth and discovery. I thought about the succulent on my windowsill, following its instincts toward light and life. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine what it might feel like to create something of my own, to make choices based on my own desires rather than someone else's expectations. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping would either kill me or teach me to fly. The following Thursday morning, I found myself standing at the kitchen window, watching the community center parking lot fill with cars. It was 10 o'clock, the exact time Elena had mentioned for the art group. Women of various ages walked toward the building, some carrying easels, others with small bags that probably contained brushes and paints. I told myself I was just curious, just observing. But my hands were shaking as I watched them disappear through the doors, and I realized I was holding my breath. Michael had left for work 2 hours earlier, kissing my forehead and reminding me to make his dentist appointment. A normal morning, a normal day in our perfectly orchestrated life. He wouldn't be home until evening. Wouldn't know if I stayed in the house all day or ventured out for an hour. The thought was revolutionary and terrifying. I found myself moving toward the closet, pulling out a simple sweater and jeans. Not the carefully chosen outfit I usually wore, designed to project the image of a successful lawyer's wife, but clothes that felt like me, or like who I might have been in another life. The walk to the community center took 8 minutes. 8 minutes of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. Moving through the world without Michael's presence or expectations weighing on my shoulders. The autumn air felt different on my skin, sharper, more real than the climate-controlled atmosphere of our house. The art room was filled with warm light and gentle chatter. About 15 women sat at easels, some painting landscapes, others working. On abstract pieces, the air smelled of coffee and acrylic paint. Creative energy mixed with easy companionship. Elena looked up as I hesitated in the doorway, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came." "I can't stay long," I said quickly, already planning my retreat. "I just wanted to see what it was like." "Perfect. Come sit here." She gestured to an empty easel beside hers. "I brought some basic supplies in case." "You decided to join us." The women around us offered warm smiles and casual greetings, then returned to their work. No interrogation, no demands for explanations. Just acceptance of my presence, no questions asked. Elena placed a palette of colors in front of me, along with a few brushes and a small canvas. "There's no right or wrong way to do this. Just put some color on the canvas and see what happens." I stared at the blank white surface, paralyzed. It had been so long since I'd been asked to make a choice without knowing the correct answer, without understanding what response would please or displease the observer. "I don't know what to paint." "Paint what you're feeling right now." What was I feeling? Terror, excitement, guilt, hope, all swirling together in a confusing mixture. I picked up a brush, dipped it in blue paint, and made a single stroke across the canvas, then another, and another. The painting that emerged was abstract, chaotic, layers of blue and gray with sudden splashes of yellow, breaking through like sunlight after a storm. It wasn't beautiful or skillful or impressive, but it was mine. Created by my hands, expressing my truth, belonging to no one but me. "That's powerful," Elena said softly, studying my work. "There's real emotion in those brushstrokes." Around us, other women were sharing their stories, laughing about failed attempts, celebrating small victories. The conversation flowed naturally, without the careful choreography I was used to. No one was performing for anyone else. They were just being themselves. "How long have you been painting?" asked a woman named Carol, her gray hair pulled back, and a loose bun, paint smudged on her fingers. "This is my first time, actually. You're a natural. Look at that color work." She pointed to a section where I'd blended yellow into the gray without even realizing what I was doing. "That's instinctive. You can't teach that. Instinctive." The word resonated through my chest like a bell. How long had it been since I'd trusted my instincts about anything? Michael had trained me to second-guess every impulse, to seek his approval. Before making even the smallest decisions, as the session continued, I found myself relaxing in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My shoulders dropped, my breathing deepened. The constant vigilance that had become my default state began to ease, just slightly, but as 11 o'clock approached, anxiety crept back in. Michael would call at noon, as he always did. I needed to be home, needed to be ready with my report of a productive morning spent on approved activities. "I have to go," I said suddenly, standing so quickly I almost knocked over my easel. "Of course." Elena didn't seem surprised by my abrupt departure. "Would you like to take your painting with you?" I stared at the canvas, at the chaotic beauty I created without permission or guidance. Taking it home would mean hiding it, explaining it, defending it. But leaving it felt like abandoning a piece of myself I'd only just discovered. I'll leave it here for now, if that's okay. Absolutely. It'll be here whenever you're ready for it. Walking home, I felt different, as if the act of creating something had shifted something fundamental inside me. The familiar streets looked the same, but I was seeing them through changed eyes. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before, the way morning light filtered through oak leaves, the architectural details on houses I'd passed hundreds of times, the small acts of life happening all around me. At home, I changed back into my usual clothes, washed the paint from my fingernails, and erased all evidence of my morning adventure. But I couldn't erase the feeling of the brush in my hand, the satisfaction of watching colors blend and transform. On the canvas, the memory of women laughing freely together. Michael's noon call came exactly on schedule. "How's your day, darling?" "Quiet. I cleaned the upstairs bathrooms and organized your closet." The lies came easily now. Practice deceptions. That rolled off my tongue without conscious thought. "How's your morning going?" "Busy. The Henderson account is demanding more revisions to their contract. Some people don't appreciate quality work." His voice carried that edge of irritation that always made my stomach clench. Someone at the office had displeased him, which meant he'd be looking for ways to discharge that frustration when he got home. "I'm sorry you're dealing with difficult clients. It's fine. I just need you to understand that I might be a bit stressed when I get home tonight. Maybe we could have a quiet evening. I'll pick up Chinese food from that place I like." A quiet evening meant no conversation that might irritate him, no activities that might disturb his peace, no evidence of my existence beyond what was necessary to serve his needs. I would become invisible, a shadow moving through our house, anticipating his wants before he expressed them. "That sounds perfect. Good. And Sarah, I know you've been feeling restless lately. Maybe we should plan a vacation soon. Somewhere warm, just the two of us." Restless. He'd noticed some change in me, some subtle shift in my behavior that had triggered his surveillance systems. The thought terrified me. Michael was expert at reading my moods, at detecting any deviation from the norm that might threaten his control. I haven't been feeling restless. I'm very happy with our life here. Of course you are. But everyone needs a change of scenery occasionally. I'll look into some options. A vacation with Michael meant a week or two of intensive performance, isolated from any potential support systems, completely dependent on his approval for every moment of every day. The idea filled me with dread. After the call ended, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the succulent on the windowsill. In just a few days, it had grown noticeably, new leaves unfurling, reaching steadily toward the light. Such a simple thing, following its nature, but somehow its persistence gave me hope. The afternoon passed slowly. I prepared for Michael's return, selecting ingredients for a meal that would soothe his stress, choosing clothes that would please him, rehearsing conversations that would keep him calm. Every decision calculated to minimize conflict, to preserve the fragile peace that kept me safe. But underneath the familiar routine, something had changed. The memory of the art group lingered like a secret flame, warming me from the inside. For 1 hour, I had existed as myself, created something from my own vision, connected with women who saw me as more than just an extension of my husband. Michael arrived home at 7, carrying bags of Chinese food and wearing the tight smile. That meant his day had been worse than he'd admitted on the phone. I greeted him with carefully calibrated enthusiasm, not too much to seem fake, not too little to seem indifferent. "How was the rest of your day?" I asked, taking the bags and beginning to unpack containers of food. "Better now that I'm home with you." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I forced myself not to tense at his touch. "You always know how to make everything better." The pressure of being his sole source of emotional regulation, his personal stress relief system, settled onto my shoulders like a familiar weight. Michael's moods were my responsibility, his happiness my job, his peace my primary purpose in life. We ate dinner in relative quiet, Michael scrolling through his phone while I served his food and refilled his wine glass without being asked. This was intimacy in our marriage, my hypervigilance disguised as attentiveness, his taking for granted what he saw as natural devotion. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," he began as I cleared the plates. "About feeling restless. Maybe you need a project, something to keep you busy while I'm working longer hours." "I'm not restless, Michael. Really." "Of course you are. You just don't realize it. That's why you've been seeming distant lately." His tone was patient, explanatory, as if he were helping me understand my own emotions. "What about redecorating the guest room? You could spend weeks researching paint colors and furniture. It would give you something to focus on." Redecorating? Another carefully controlled activity, another way to channel my energy into something that served his vision of our life. The guest room would need to meet his standards, reflect his tastes, contribute to the image he wanted to project. Any creativity would be filtered through his approval, any choices subject to his veto. "That's a wonderful idea," I said, because agreeing was easier than arguing, safer than resistance. "Perfect. I'll transfer some money into your account tomorrow. Take your time, do it right. Quality over speed." He smiled, pleased with his solution to a problem I hadn't known I had. "I love seeing you happy and productive." That night, lying beside him in our bed, I thought about the painting I'd left at the community center. Wild brushstrokes of blue and gray, chaotic but honest. Ugly perhaps, but authentically mine. It was probably the first thing I created in years that hadn't been filtered through Michael's expectations, shaped by his approval or disapproval. The next Thursday, I found myself making excuses to walk past the community center. I told myself I was just going to the pharmacy, taking a longer route for the exercise, but my steps slowed as I approached the building. Through the windows, I could see the art group in session, women bent over their easels. Creating freely. My painting would still be there, waiting for me. The thought was both comforting and dangerous. That afternoon, Michael came home early, finding me in the guest room with paint samples spread across the floor. I'd been staring at them for hours without really seeing them, my mind elsewhere. "How's the project coming along?" He surveyed the room with the critical eye of someone inspecting an investment. "I see you're taking the color selection seriously." "I want to make sure we choose something that will work well with the rest of the house." I gestured to the samples, dozens of nearly identical shades of beige and cream. Safe colors. Approved colors. Colors that would offend no one and inspire. Nothing. Good thinking, nothing too bold. We want guests to feel comfortable, not overwhelmed. He picked up one of the samples, a shade called Whisper White, that looked exactly like every other white in our house. "This one has potential?" I nodded, though something inside me rebelled against the endless neutrality, the systematic elimination of anything that might be considered too much. When had I become someone who chose colors based on their ability to disappear? Actually, I heard myself saying, I was wondering about maybe adding just a small accent wall. Nothing dramatic, just a touch of color to give the room some personality. Michael's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the way it always did. When I suggested something beyond his vision for our life. An accent wall? What kind of color were you thinking? The question was a trap. Any color I suggested would be too bold, too risky, too much evidence of my own taste rather than his careful curation of our aesthetic. But something made me continue. Maybe a soft blue? Or a warm yellow? Yellow? His laugh was gentle, indulgent. The sound he made when I said something charmingly naive. Darling, yellow is such a challenging color. It can look cheap if it's not done exactly right, and it's so hard to coordinate with furniture. Blue might work, but it would have to be very subtle, very carefully chosen. The words stung because they were designed to. Not a direct rejection, but a systematic dismantling of my confidence in my own judgment. He was right, of course. What did I know about interior design? What expertise did I have in choosing colors that wouldn't embarrass us both? You're right. White is probably the safest choice. I'm not trying to be controlling, Sarah. I just want to protect you from making decisions you might regret later. His voice was warm, loving, concerned. You have wonderful instincts, but sometimes you need someone with more experience to guide you. That night, I dreamed about colors. Vivid blues and shocking yellows, wild purples and passionate reds, all swirling together in patterns that made no sense but felt completely right. I woke with the image still burning behind my eyelids, my heart racing as if I'd been running. The following week, Michael left for a 3-day business trip to Chicago. As his taxi pulled away from the curb, I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't natural. 3 days. 72 hours of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. I stood in the doorway for a long time after his car disappeared, just breathing. The morning air felt different without his presence in the house. Lighter somehow, full of possibilities I trained myself not to see. The first day, I barely left the house, too conditioned to confinement to know what to do with liberty. I walked through our rooms, seeing them differently, noticing how little of myself existed in the spaces where I spent my life. Everything was beautiful, expensive, perfectly coordinated, and completely devoid of my personality. The second day, I found myself at the community center. Elena looked up as I entered the art room, her face brightening with surprise and something that looked like relief. Sarah, I was hoping we'd see you again. My painting was exactly where I'd left it, propped against the wall beside Elena's easel. Looking at it now, with some distance, I was struck by its emotional honesty. Chaotic, yes, but alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I brought some new colors today, Elena said casually, setting up a fresh canvas for me. Thought you might want to experiment. The palette she placed before me was a revelation. Warm yellows and deep blues, rich purples and vibrant greens. Colors that demanded attention that refused to disappear into the background. I don't know, I said, my hand hovering over the brushes. Maybe I should stick with more neutral tones. Why? The simple question stopped me cold. Why should I stick with neutral tones? Because Michael preferred them? Because they were safer? Because choosing bold colors might reveal something about myself I wasn't supposed to show. I'm not sure I have the skill to handle such strong colors. There's no skill required for honesty, Elena said gently. Paint what you feel, not what you think you should feel. I picked up a brush, dipped it in yellow, and made a stroke across the canvas, then another. The color was shocking after so many years of beige and white, like sunshine after a long winter. I added blue, then green, then purple, watching as they interacted and transformed each other. The painting that emerged was completely different from my first attempt. Where the earlier work had been stormy and turbulent, this one pulsed with life and energy. Swirls of yellow danced with deep blues, creating unexpected purples where they met. Green vines seemed to grow across the canvas, reaching toward corners filled with warm light. It's beautiful, Carol said, leaning over to study my work. Look how the colors sing together. You have a real gift for this, a gift. When was the last time anyone had suggested I might be gifted at something? Michael often praised my cooking, my organization skills, my ability to manage our social calendar, but these were always framed as services I provided rather than talents I possessed. I can't take this home, I said suddenly, the reality of my situation crashing back down on me. My husband, he wouldn't understand. Elena nodded knowingly. We have storage space here. Your paintings can stay as long as you need them to. Paintings? Plural? I hope so. You're just getting started. That afternoon, I walked home in a daze, my hands still tingling from the memory of brush against canvas, the tactile pleasure of creating something from nothing. The familiar streets looked different somehow, more vivid, as if my exploration of color had enhanced my ability to see the world around me at home. I returned to the guest room and the paint samples, but they looked impossibly dull now. Whisper. White and barely beige and all the other colors designed to avoid offense, to blend seamlessly into backgrounds, to never demand attention or provoke emotion. I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the succulent on the windowsill. It had grown again, new leaves unfurling with quiet determination. Without thinking, I moved it to a more prominent spot on the counter where it could catch more light, where it would be impossible to ignore Dot the third day of Michael's absence. I woke early and returned to the art group. This time, I brought a small sketchbook I'd found in a drawer, something left over from college that had survived Michael's systematic purging of my pre-marriage possessions. I thought I might try drawing, I told Elena as I settled at my easel. Wonderful. Drawing is the foundation of everything. It teaches you to really see. To really see. How long had it been since I'd looked at the world with attention rather than vigilance? How long since I'd observed something for the pleasure of observation rather than scanning for threats or problems? I started with simple objects. A coffee, cup, a flower in a vase, Elena's hands as she worked on her own painting. The act of drawing forced me to slow down, to notice details I'd been blind to for years. The way light caught the rim of the cup, creating a delicate highlight. The complex architecture of the flower's petals, each one unique. The grace in Elena's fingers as they guided her brush. You're seeing, Elena said softly, glancing at my sketches. Really seeing, that's the hardest part for most people. During lunch break, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Can I ask? About your husband? You seem careful when you mention him. I felt my automatic defenses rising, the practice responses that protected both Michael's reputation and my safety. But something about Elena's kind eyes, the gentle way she asked, made me hesitate. He's very successful, a lawyer. He works hard to provide for us. The words came out flat, rehearsed, devoid of any real emotion. That doesn't answer my question. I don't know what you mean. Sarah. Elena's voice was patient but persistent. I've been where you are. I recognize the signs. The words hit me like a physical blow. She knew. Somehow, this woman I barely met could see through the performance, past the careful facade, to the truth I'd been hiding for years. I don't know what you think you see, but you're wrong. The denial came automatically, a reflex developed over years of practice. Michael is a wonderful husband. I'm very lucky. Of course. Elena didn't argue, didn't push, but her eyes held a knowledge that made me want to run and confess everything at the same time. I just want you to know that if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. That afternoon, I left the community center feeling exposed, as if Elena had somehow seen through my skin to the bones beneath. The walk home felt longer than usual. Every step weighted with the fear that my secret was no longer secret, that the carefully constructed walls around my life were beginning to crumble. Michael called that evening to check in, his voice warm and loving through the phone. I miss you, darling. How are you handling being on your own? I miss you too. It's been quiet here. I've been working on paint samples for the guest room. Good. I can't wait to see what you've chosen. Have you been getting out at all? Seeing anyone? The question seemed casual, but I heard the edge beneath it. Michael's radar for disruption in his carefully ordered world was highly tuned, sensitive to any deviation from the norm. Just the usual grocery shopping, a quick coffee with Margaret. The lies came easier now, almost without conscious thought. Nothing exciting. Perfect. I like knowing you're safe at home, taking care of our life together. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Can you make that salmon dish I love? I've been craving it all week. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen staring at the succulent, which seemed to have grown even more in just one day. Its leaves were fuller now, more confident, reaching boldly toward the light. Such a simple thing, following its nature, but somehow its persistence felt like a challenge. A question about what I might become if I had the courage to grow toward what I needed most. Michael returned the next evening in a foul mood, his business trip having gone poorly. I could read the signs in his posture as he walked through the door, the tight set of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he set down his briefcase. The salmon was perfectly prepared, the house spotless, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. The Chicago deal fell through, he said without preamble, loosening his tie with sharp, angry movements. 6 months of work down the drain because the client decided to go with a cheaper firm. I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly frustrating. Frustrating doesn't begin to cover it. He poured himself a scotch, his movements controlled but violent. Do you know what the worst part is? They waited until I was actually in their office to tell me. Made me sit through 2 hours of meetings before dropping this bomb. I murmured. Appropriate sympathies while serving dinner, my body automatically adjusting to his mood, becoming smaller, quieter, less likely to attract his anger. This was a dance I knew well, the delicate choreography of managing Michael's emotions, but something was different this time. Maybe it was the 3 days of freedom, the memory of colors and creation, the growing awareness of what life could feel like without constant vigilance. Whatever it was, I found myself observing the situation rather than just surviving it, seeing our dynamic from the outside. The guest room project is coming along well, I said, trying to redirect his attention to something positive. I've narrowed down the paint choices. Show me. We went upstairs after dinner, and I spread the paint samples across the guest bed. Michael examined each one with the same intensity he brought to legal contracts, looking for flaws, inconsistencies, reasons for rejection. These are all very similar, he said finally. Very safe choices. Good job. The praise felt hollow, patronizing. Good job for choosing colors so neutral they might as well be invisible. Good job for staying within the narrow boundaries of his approval. Good job for being exactly what he trained me to be. Actually, I heard myself saying, I was wondering if we might consider something with a bit more character. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle accent that would give the room some personality. Michael's expression shifted, and I felt the familiar chill of his displeasure. I thought we discussed this already. Accent walls are risky. They date quickly, and they can make a room feel smaller. I know, but I found some really beautiful blues that might work. Very sophisticated, very elegant. Sarah. His voice carried a warning now, the tone that meant I was approaching dangerous territory. We've already invested a lot of time in this decision. I don't want you second-guessing yourself and making impulsive choices we'll both regret. But for the first time in years, I didn't back down immediately. The memory of yellow paint on canvas, of creating something beautiful and bold, gave me a courage I'd forgotten I possessed. I'm not second-guessing myself. I'm just exploring options. Options? Michael's laugh was sharp, dismissive. Since when are you an interior design expert? Since when do you know better than professionals about what works in a space? The words were designed to cut, to remind me of my place in our hierarchy, But instead of shrinking away, I felt something harden inside me. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I just think I should have some input in decorating my own home. Your home? The question hung in the air like a threat. I'm the one who pays the mortgage, Sarah. I'm the one who works 60-hour weeks to maintain our lifestyle. This is our home, and decisions about it should be made carefully, not based on some sudden whim for color. Our home. But what part of it reflected me? What corner or surface or choice showed any evidence that I lived here, that I had opinions or preferences or dreams of my own? I understand that you work hard to provide for us, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, but I live here too. I should be able to have some say in how it looks. Michael stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. He wasn't used to resistance from me, wasn't prepared for this version of Sarah, who pushed back instead of immediately surrendering. Of course you should have input, he said finally, his tone shifting to reasonable, even generous. I'm not trying to control everything. I just want to make sure we make smart decisions together. Together. The word was meaningless in the context of our marriage, where Michael's opinion was the only one that mattered, where my role was to enthusiastically agree with whatever he decided. Then maybe we could look at some other options tomorrow. I could show you the blues I was thinking about. If it's that important to you, fine. We'll look at your blues. His tone suggested he was humoring me, indulging a child's irrational fixation, but I want you to understand that the final decision needs to be something we both feel good about. Both, another meaningless word. We both would feel good about it once I was convinced to abandon my preferences in favor of his superior judgment. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I thought about the conversation, about the small act of defiance I'd committed. It hadn't resulted in victory, exactly, but it hadn't resulted in immediate defeat either. For the first time in years, I'd stated my own opinion and survived the experience. It was a tiny thing, barely worth noting, but it felt significant somehow. Like the first crack in a dam that had been holding back years of suppressed thoughts and feelings and desires. The succulent on my windowsill seemed to glow in the moonlight, its leaves reaching confidently toward whatever light they could find. Such a simple thing, following its nature, but its persistence was beginning to feel like a lesson, a reminder that growth was possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. The next morning, Michael left for work with a perfunctory kiss and a reminder about his preference for white walls. But instead of immediately abandoning my blue paint idea, I found myself researching color theory online, looking at images of rooms that used bold choices successfully. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on my own curiosity rather than someone else's approval. The doorbell rang at 10:30. Elena stood on my porch, holding a small wrapped package. I hope I'm not intruding, she said. I brought you something. Inside the package was a set of watercolor pencils, professional quality, along with a small pad of watercolor paper. I thought you might enjoy experimenting at home. These are very forgiving for beginners. Elena, I can't accept this. It's too generous. It's not generous, it's selfish. I love seeing people discover their creativity. It feeds my soul. She paused, studying my face. How are you doing? You seemed upset when you left yesterday. The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. When was the last time someone had asked how I was doing and actually waited for a real answer? I'm fine. Just dealing with some household decisions. The paint colors. I nodded, surprised by her intuition. Can I tell you something? When I left my ex-husband 5 years ago, the first thing I did was paint my entire apartment purple. Bright, bold, unapologetic purple. It was the most liberating thing I'd ever done. Left her ex-husband. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I'm not in that situation, I said quickly. Michael, and I just have different tastes, that's all. Of course. Elena's tone was carefully neutral. Different tastes can be challenging in a relationship. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with the watercolor pencils, testing colors on the paper. The blue I'd wanted for the guest room looked even more beautiful in watercolor form. Soft but confident, peaceful but not boring. I found myself sketching the guest room as I imagined it could be, one wall painted in that gorgeous blue, white furniture that looked fresh rather than sterile. Artwork that reflected joy rather than expensive neutrality. The drawing was crude, unprofessional, but it represented something I'd almost forgotten existed. My own vision of beauty, untainted by someone else's standards. Michael came home early again, catching me at the kitchen table with pencils and paper spread around me. What's this? He picked up one of my sketches, studying it with the same critical attention he gave everything else in our life. Just some ideas for the guest room. I was trying to visualize different options. You drew this? It's just a rough sketch. Nothing. Professional. I didn't know you could draw. His tone was neutral, but I heard the underlying question. What else didn't he know about me? What other capabilities had I been hiding? I took some art classes in college. It's nothing serious. He set the sketch down carefully, but I noticed he didn't throw it away. These pencils are expensive. Where did they come from? The question I've been dreading. In Michael's world, everything had to be accounted for, every purchase justified, every gift explained. Elena, the new neighbor, brought them by. She's been very welcoming. Elena again. Michael's voice carried a note of disapproval. She seems to be taking quite an interest in you. She's just being friendly. It's nice to have neighbors who care about the community. Is it? Or is she just bored and looking for drama? He picked up another sketch, this one showing the blue accent wall I'd been imagining. This is the color you wanted, isn't it? Yes, I know you prefer whites, but I thought maybe we could compromise. Compromise. He said the word as if it tasted unpleasant. Sarah, do you remember when we bought this house? Do you remember how carefully we planned every detail to create a cohesive aesthetic? Of course. And now you want to introduce random elements that don't fit with our vision? Our vision. Except it had never been our vision, had it? It had been Michael's vision, implemented with my labor, funded by his income, designed to reflect his taste and status. I don't think one accent wall would destroy the aesthetic we've created. No, then you don't understand how design works. Every element has to work together. One wrong choice can undermine everything else. He held up the sketch, studying it with the intensity of a judge reviewing evidence. This isn't you, Sarah. This isn't the woman I married. The woman he married. Sarah Chen, 27 years old, fresh from graduate school, full of opinions and dreams and plans for changing the world. He was right. That woman would have painted every wall a different color if she felt like it. She would have filled the house with plants and art and evidence of her existence. Maybe I've changed, I said quietly. Changed how? Into what? The question hung between us, loaded with threat. Michael's world only worked if I remained constant, predictable, manageable. Change implied growth, and growth implied the possibility that I might outgrow the role he'd assigned me. I don't know. I just feel like I want to express myself more. Express yourself? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sarah, you express yourself every day. Through the way you maintain our home, through the dinners you cook, through the way you support my career. Your expression is everywhere, but it wasn't, was it? My expression had been systematically edited, refined, and approved until it was no longer mine at all. What he saw as my expression was actually my erasure, the careful elimination of anything that might conflict with his vision of who I should be. I'd like to try painting, I said suddenly. Taking some classes, maybe joining a group. The words seemed to echo in the quiet kitchen, bold and terrifying and completely honest. Michael stared at me for a long moment, his expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. Painting classes? There's a group that meets at the community center. Very casual, just women getting together to create art and socialize. Since when are you interested in art? Since when do you want to socialize with strangers? The questions felt like accusations, as if my sudden interest in creativity was evidence of some deeper betrayal. In Michael's world, I wasn't supposed to develop new interests without his guidance, wasn't supposed to want things he hadn't approved. I've always been interested in art, I just haven't had the opportunity to explore it. You've had plenty of opportunities. I've taken you to galleries, bought you art books, supported your appreciation of culture. Appreciation. As if art was something to be consumed passively rather than created actively. As if my role was to admire what others had made rather than making something myself. That's different. I want to try creating something myself. Why? The question was sharp, demanding. What's wrong with appreciating the work of real artists? Why do you need to make amateur attempts at something professionals spend years mastering? Because I need to know what it feels like to bring something into existence with my own hands. Because I need to see what happens when I make choices based on my own vision rather than someone else's approval. Because I'm disappearing, becoming invisible even to myself, and creating something might prove I still exist, but I couldn't say any of that. Instead, I offered the safest possible explanation. I think it might be relaxing, a good way to manage stress. Stress? What stress do you have? You don't work, you don't have children, you don't have any real responsibilities beyond maintaining our home. His voice was rising now, the careful control beginning to slip. Your entire life is designed to be stress-free. I know how fortunate I am, I said quickly, recognizing the warning signs, trying to diffuse his anger before it exploded. I didn't mean to imply that I have real problems. Then why do you need art classes? Why do you need to spend time with strangers when you have everything you could want right here? Everything I could want? A beautiful house I hadn't chosen, furniture I hadn't selected, a life I hadn't designed. Everything except autonomy, except choice, except the right to exist. As myself rather than as his creation. You're right, I don't need anything else. I was just being silly, but Michael wasn't satisfied with my retreat. Something about my brief rebellion had triggered his need to reassert control, to remind me of the consequences of stepping outside, the boundaries he had established. Silly isn't the word I'd use. His voice was cold now, distant. Ungrateful might be more accurate. Selfish, certainly. The words hit their target, triggering the guilt and shame he'd spent years cultivating in me. I was ungrateful. I was selfish. What kind of woman had everything handed to her and still wanted more? I'm sorry, Michael. I don't know what got into me. I do. It's that neighbor, isn't it? Elena. She's been filling your head with ideas about what you're missing, making you dissatisfied with our life. No, she hasn't said anything like that. She doesn't have to say it directly. Some women can't stand to see others happy in their marriages. They have to plant seeds of discontent, make you question what you have. The accusation was so far from the truth, it was almost laughable. Elena had never criticized my marriage, never suggested I should be dissatisfied. If anything, she'd been careful to avoid judgment, offering only support and friendship. Elena is just being neighborly. She's not trying to cause problems, isn't she? Then why did she bring you art supplies? Why is she so interested in getting you to join her little group? Because she recognizes something in me that you've tried to erase. Because she sees potential where you see only problems to be managed. Because she remembers what it's like to be creative and free. I think she's just trying to be friendly, Sarah. Michael's voice shifted again, becoming gentle, concerned. The tone he used when he was about to deliver a lesson disguised as care. You're so trusting, so innocent. You don't see how people can manipulate kind-hearted women like you. Kind-hearted women like me. Code for women too naive to recognize their own best interests. Too foolish to navigate the world without masculine protection and guidance. I can handle Elena Rodriguez, can you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's already gotten into your head. Suddenly you want to paint. Suddenly you're questioning or decorating decisions. Suddenly you're dissatisfied with the beautiful life we've built together. The beautiful life we built. Except I hadn't built anything. I'd been built, shaped, and molded and refined until I fit perfectly into the role he'd designed for me. I'm not dissatisfied with our life. Good, because I'd hate to think that some bored housewife with a paintbrush could undo everything we've worked so hard to create. That night, Michael made love to me with unusual intensity, as if he were reclaiming territory that had been threatened. I lay beneath him, staring at the ceiling, feeling more disconnected from my body than ever before. This was ownership disguised as intimacy, possession masquerading as love. Afterward, as he slept beside me, I thought about the watercolor pencils hidden in the kitchen drawer, about the paintings waiting for me at the community center, about the woman I'd been before I learned to make myself small enough to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. The succulent on the windowsill seemed to glow in the darkness, its leaves reaching toward whatever light they could find, growing despite the constraints of its environment. Such a simple thing, following its nature, but its persistence felt like a challenge. A question about what I might become if I had the courage to grow toward what I needed most. 3 days later, Elena knocked on my door again, this time carrying a small canvas and a concerned expression. I finished a piece I'd like you to have, she said, holding out the painting. But I also wanted to check on you. You seemed upset the other day. The painting took my breath away. It was a succulent, painted in vivid greens and yellows, its leaves reaching confidently toward a source of light just outside the frame. But what struck me most was the expression of life in it, the sense of growth and determination despite constraints. It's beautiful, I whispered, holding Elena's painting carefully, afraid I might damage something so perfect. But I can't keep it. Michael wouldn't understand. Sarah. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Can I ask you something? When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, without considering how someone else might react? The question hit me like a physical blow. When had I last acted purely from my own desires? When had I last made a choice based on what would make me happy rather than what would keep the peace? I make choices all the time, I said weakly. Do you? Or do you make the choices you think you're supposed to make? I stared at the painting, at the succulent reaching toward light. With such confidence, such determination. Elena had painted it as she saw it, without asking permission, without considering whether anyone else would approve of her vision. I want to come back to the art group, I said suddenly. I know it's complicated, but I want to try. Elena's face lit up. Thursday mornings, 10 o'clock. No pressure, no expectations, just women creating together. After she left, I hid the painting in the back of my closet, behind winter coats Michael rarely touched. But I couldn't hide the feeling it had awakened in me, the recognition of something I'd thought was lost forever. That Thursday, I told Michael I was going grocery shopping. The lie came easily, practice from years of small deceptions designed to avoid conflict, but this felt different, more significant. This wasn't hiding a purchase or a conversation. This was hiding a part of myself that was struggling to emerge, The art group welcomed me back as if I'd never left. My paintings were still there, propped against the wall, waiting for me. Looking at them now, I was struck by how much they revealed. About my inner state, the first all storm and chaos. The second, bright with unexpected joy. Both honest in ways I'd forgotten how to be in the rest of my life. "What do you want to work on today?" Elena asked, setting up a fresh canvas for me. "I want to paint something growing," I said. "Something reaching toward light." I worked in silence for most of the session, losing myself in the simple pleasure of putting color on canvas. Around me, other women chatted and laughed, sharing stories about their lives, their families, their dreams. It was a kind of intimacy I'd almost forgotten existed, the easy companionship of women supporting each other without agenda or judgment. "That's powerful," Carol said, pausing behind my easel. "What inspired it?" I looked at my painting with surprise, as if seeing it for the first time. I'd painted a woman, her arms reaching upward, surrounded by swirls of color that seemed to be lifting her toward a source of light at the top of the canvas. Her face was turned upward, hopeful, determined. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It just came out of me." "That's how the best art happens," Elena said softly. "When you stop thinking and start feeling." On the walk home, I felt different again, charged with the energy I couldn't name. The act of creating something purely from my own vision, without consideration for anyone else's approval, had awakened something that had been dormant for years. But as I approached her house, reality crashed back down on me. Michael's car was in the driveway. He was home early, and I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I found him in the kitchen, standing by the window, holding my succulent in his hands. "Where were you?" His voice was calm, controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Grocery shopping." "I told you this morning. Did you?" "Because I don't see any groceries." He set the plant down with deliberate care. "And this little plant has been moved. It used to be on the windowsill, now it's on the counter." Funny how plants move themselves around when you're grocery shopping. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it. Michael's attention to detail was legendary, his ability to detect even the smallest changes in his environment almost supernatural. "I moved it this morning. I thought it might get better light there." "Better light?" He picked up the plant again, examining it as if it were evidence in a case. "Since when do you know about plant care? Since when do you rearrange things without discussing it with me first?" "It's just a plant, Michael." I didn't think it was a big deal. "Just a plant?" "Nothing in our home is just anything, Sarah. Everything has its place. Everything serves a purpose in the overall design we've created together." Together. That word again, meaningless in the context of our relationship. "You're right. I should have asked before moving it." "Yes, you should have. But that's not really what this is about, is it?" He moved closer, and I instinctively stepped back. "This is about your new friend, Elena. This is about art classes and blue paint and suddenly questioning decisions we've already made." How did he know? Had he been watching me? Following me? Or was his understanding of my psychology so complete that he could predict my rebellion before I even acted on it? "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I can always tell when you're lying." His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something predatory in his posture now. "Where were you this morning?" The moment stretched between us, loaded with consequence. I could continue lying, hope he didn't have actual proof, maintain the fiction that I was still the obedient wife he thought he'd created. Or I could tell the truth and face whatever came next. I went to an art group at the community center. The admission hung in the air like a confession of murder. Michael's face went through a series of expressions, settling finally on something that looked almost like disappointment. "After I specifically told you it was a bad idea, you didn't forbid me to go." I shouldn't have to forbid you to do things that are obviously harmful to our marriage. I thought you had better judgment than that. Harmful to our marriage. As if spending 2 hours painting with other women was an act of betrayal comparable to adultery. How is it harmful? I'm not doing anything wrong. Aren't you? You're lying to me about where you go. You're bringing strangers' influences into our home. You're questioning decisions we've made together. You're changing, Sarah, and not in a good way. Maybe I need to change. Maybe I've been too passive, too willing to let you make all the decisions. The words were out before I could stop them, more honest than I'd been in years. Michael stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Too passive? Sarah, passivity isn't your problem. Your problem is that you don't understand how good you have it here. Your problem is that you're letting outsiders convince you that there's something wrong with a marriage that works perfectly. Does it work perfectly? For who? For both of us. I provide everything you could possibly need, and you provide the support and stability that allows me to be successful. It's a partnership, Sarah. A beautiful, balanced partnership. What if I want more than just providing support? What if I want to create something myself, have my own interests, my own friends? You can have interests. You can have friends. But they need to fit into our life together, not threaten it. How does painting threaten our life? Michael was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer, more vulnerable, almost pleading. Because I'm losing. You, Sarah. I can see it happening, and it terrifies me. You're pulling away, becoming someone I don't recognize. Do you have any idea how that feels? The vulnerability in Michael's voice almost undid me. This was the man I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. The one who'd seemed so strong and confident, but occasionally revealed glimpses of uncertainty, of need. This was the Michael who convinced me that he needed my support, my devotion, my complete dedication to our shared life. You're not losing me, I said softly, my resolve already beginning to weaken. I'm just trying to grow as a person. Grow? Into what? Someone who lies to her husband? Someone who brings chaos into a peaceful home? Someone who destroys what we've built together for the sake of finger painting with strangers? The dismissive tone was back, the careful way he minimized my interests while maximizing their threat to his control. But mixed with it was genuine pain, real fear of abandonment that spoke to the part of me that had always been his caretaker. I don't want to destroy anything. I just want to explore a part of myself that I've neglected. What part? The part that makes impulsive decisions. The part that brings instability into our perfectly ordered life. The part that values the opinions of women you barely know over the wisdom of your husband. Each question was designed to make me doubt myself, to highlight the ways my newfound independence might be selfish or destructive. This was Michael's particular talent, the ability to frame my growth as his victimization, my needs as threats. To his well-being. I value your opinion, Michael. But I also think I should be allowed to have some interests of my own. You do have interests? You love cooking, you're passionate about interior design, you take pride in maintaining our home. These aren't just hobbies, Sarah. They're expressions of who you are, who I was, or who he'd needed me to become. The woman who found fulfillment in serving others, who expressed creativity only in ways that benefited him, who never wanted anything he couldn't provide or control. What if those things aren't enough anymore? What if I want to create something? That belongs to me. Nothing belongs to just you, Sarah. We're married. We're a team. Everything we do affects both of us. He moved closer, his voice becoming gentle, persuasive. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect what we have together. Maybe what we have isn't worth protecting if it requires me to give up parts of myself. The word shocked us both. I'd never articulated that thought before, never allowed myself to question whether our marriage was worth the price I'd been paying to maintain it. Michael's face went white, then flushed with anger. Parts of yourself? What parts exactly? The part that wants to embarrass us both with amateur art? The part that thinks you know better than your husband about what's good for our marriage? The part that wants to exist as more than just an extension of you? The admission exploded out of me with years of suppressed frustration behind it. For the first time in our marriage, I was speaking my complete truth, holding nothing back to protect his feelings or preserve our fragile peace. Michael stared at me in silence, his expression cycling through shock, hurt, and finally settling on something cold and calculating. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. An extension of me? Is that really how you see yourself? After everything I've given you, everything I've sacrificed to build this life for us, you think you're just an extension of me? That's not what I meant. No, I think it's exactly what you meant. I think you've been listening to too many feminist fairy tales about oppressed housewives and evil husbands, and now you see yourself as some kind of victim. I'm not a victim, Michael. I'm just the woman who wants to paint. Just wants to paint. He laughed bitterly. Do you hear yourself? Do you understand how self-centered that sounds? You have a beautiful home, financial security, a husband who adores you, and all you can think about is finger painting with a bunch of bored housewives. They're not bored housewives. They're women with talents and dreams. What? Dreams, Sarah? The dream of making amateur art that no one will ever want to buy or display? The dream of joining a coffee clutch that gossips about their marriages and complains about their lives? The dream of being themselves without apology? And what if being yourself means destroying everything we've built together? What if your authentic self is incompatible with being a good wife? The question hung between us like a sword. What if he was right? What if the woman I was becoming couldn't coexist with the woman he married? What if choosing myself meant losing everything else? I don't know, I admitted. But I need to find out? No, you don't. Michael's voice was firm now, decisive. You need to remember who you are and what you have to lose. You need to stop letting strangers fill your head with discontent and start appreciating the life you're lucky enough to live. Lucky enough to live. Michael, do you hear yourself? You're talking about my life as if it's a privilege you grant me rather than something I'm entitled to. Entitled to? Sarah, no one is entitled to anything. Everything. We've earned through hard work and good decisions. Your part in that equation is being the supportive, stable partner that allows me to succeed. And what about my success? What about my fulfillment? What about what I need to be happy? Your fulfillment comes from our success as a couple. Your happiness comes from knowing you're essential to everything we've accomplished. He reached for my hands, his touch gentle but somehow possessive. I need you, Sarah, not some new version of you that's been corrupted by outside influences. I need the woman I married. The woman he married. Sarah Chen, 27 years old, full of dreams and plans and idealistic notions about changing the world. She would have laughed at the idea that her fulfillment could only come through someone else's success. She would have painted every wall in the house purple if she'd wanted to. What if the woman you married was never real? What if she was just who I thought I was supposed to be? Michael dropped my hands as if they'd burned him. The suggestion that our entire marriage might be built on a false foundation was more threatening than any accusation of control or abuse. It challenged not just his behavior, but the very narrative he constructed about our love story. That's the most hurtful thing you've ever said to me. His voice was wounded, betrayed. Are you telling me that our entire relationship has been a lie? That every moment of happiness we've shared was fake? I'm not saying it was fake. I'm saying maybe I didn't know who I really was when we met. Maybe I've changed, or maybe I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be. Meant to be? By who? Some cosmic force that suddenly decided you need to be an artist? Some feminist ideology that says marriage is oppression? By me, Michael? Meant to be by me? The simplicity of the statement seemed to stun him. For all his psychological sophistication, his ability to twist conversations and reframe realities, he had no response to the basic claim that I might know myself better than he knew me. This is Elena's influence, isn't it? This whole crisis of identity started when she moved into the neighborhood. Elena didn't create anything. She just reminded me that other ways of living exist. Other ways of living? What's wrong with the way we live? What's missing from this life that you think you need? Color, I said suddenly, surprising myself. With the honesty, I need color in my life. Real color, not just the approved neutrals that offend no one and inspire nothing. Color? We're destroying our marriage over interior decorating preferences. We're not destroying anything. I'm just asking for the right to make some choices about the space where I spend my life. Fine. Michael's voice was sharp, frustrated. Paint the damn guest room blue. Paint it purple if you want. I don't care anymore. But I could see that. He did care deeply. The offer to let me choose the paint color was meant to appease me, to give me a small victory so I'd abandon the larger rebellion. It was a tactical retreat, not a genuine surrender. It's not just about paint, Michael. Then what is it about? What do you actually want from me? I want you to see me as a separate person, not just as your wife. I want to be able to have interests and friendships and opinions that don't require your approval. I want to create things and explore who I might become if I'm allowed to grow. And if who you become is incompatible with being married to me, the question I'd been avoiding, the fear that kept me trapped in patterns that no longer served me. What if becoming myself meant losing everything else? What if the price of authenticity was complete isolation? I don't know, I admitted. But I know that staying exactly as I am is killing something inside me. Michael was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more distant. I see. So this is an ultimatum then. Change our entire relationship, or lose you to some midlife crisis about finger painting. It's not an ultimatum. It's just me trying to be honest about what I need. What you need is to remember how good you have it here. What you need is to stop listening to bitter women who want to destroy happy marriages because they couldn't. Make their own work. Elena's not bitter. She's one of the most joyful people I've ever met. Joyful? She's divorced Sarah. She's alone. She's trying to recruit other women into her misery because she can't stand to see them happily married. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time she said anything positive about marriage? When was the last time she encouraged you to appreciate what you have instead of focusing on what you think you're missing? I tried to remember my conversations with Elena to find evidence that would contradict Michael's characterization. But the truth was, we talked mostly about art, about creativity, about the joy of making something beautiful. She'd never directly criticized my marriage, but she'd also never celebrated it. She's not trying to break up our marriage, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously. She sees what we have, the love and stability and success, and it reminds her of what she lost. So she plants little seeds of discontent, makes you question what you have, encourage you to think you deserve more. What if I do deserve more? More than unconditional love from a devoted husband? More than financial security and a beautiful home? More than the freedom to pursue any interest that fits into our life together? Michael's voice was rising now, the careful control finally cracking. What more could you possibly deserve, Sarah? The right to exist as myself. You do exist as yourself. This is yourself. The woman standing in front of me The woman I've loved and supported and cherished for 7 years. This is who you are. No, I said quietly. This is who you needed me to be. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Michael stared at me as if I'd become a stranger, someone he'd never seen before. I don't know who you are anymore, he said finally. Neither do I. That's why I need the space to find out. Space? What kind of space? I don't know yet. Maybe therapy, maybe time apart. Maybe just the freedom to make some choices without having to justify them to you. Time apart? Michael's voice was incredulous. You want to separate over art classes? I wanted to figure out who I am when I'm not focused entirely on being your wife. Being my wife is who you are, Sarah. It's not a role you play. It's your identity. It's what gives your life meaning and purpose. What if I want my life to have meaning and purpose beyond serving someone else's needs? Someone else? I'm not someone else. I'm your husband. The person who loves you more than anyone in the world ever will. The desperation in his voice was real, the fear of loss genuine. But underneath it was something else, something that sounded like possession disguised as devotion. I know you love me, Michael, but I need you to love me enough to let me discover who I really am. And if who you really are is someone who doesn't want to be married to me. The question we'd been dancing around finally spoken aloud. The fear that had kept me trapped for so long, the terror that choosing myself might mean losing everything else. Then at least we'll both know the truth. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stood perfectly still, his face cycling through emotions I'd never seen before. Shock, betrayal, rage, and underneath it all, something that looked almost like grief. 7 years, he said finally. 7 years of building a life together, and you're willing to throw it all away for what? The chance to find yourself? To discover some authentic version of Sarah that's been hiding all this time? I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just asking for the chance to grow. Grow into what? Someone who breaks promises? Someone who abandons commitments when they become inconvenient? His voice was bitter now, wounded. I thought you were different, Sarah. I thought you understood what marriage really means. What does it mean to you, Michael? It means choosing each other every day, regardless of what else you think you might want. It means putting the relationship first, even when it's hard. It means being willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. And what have you sacrificed? The question caught him off guard. What have I sacrificed? I've sacrificed everything. Sarah, my freedom, my independence, my ability to make decisions based purely on what's best for me. I've devoted my entire adult life to building something with you. You've built a successful career, accumulated wealth, created a home that reflects your taste, and found a wife who supports your ambitions without question. What exactly did you sacrifice to get those things? I sacrificed the right to be selfish. I sacrificed the luxury of thinking only about my own needs and desires. When was the last time you considered my needs and desires? Every day. Every decision I make is filtered through what's best for us as a couple. What's best for us, or what's best for you? Michael stared at me as if I'd slapped him. Those are the same things, Sarah. That's what marriage means. What's good for one of us is good for both of us. Unless what's good for me threatens what's good for you. Nothing that's genuinely good for you could threaten our marriage. If something threatens what we have together, then it's not actually good for you. It just feels good in the moment. The circular logic was dizzying, designed to make any desire I had that conflicted with his automatically suspect. If I wanted something he didn't approve of, then by definition it wasn't actually good for me. What if you're wrong? What if some things that are good for me don't fit into your vision of our marriage? Then we find a way to make them fit, or we recognize that they're not as important as what we have together. And who decides which things are important enough to preserve and which things should be sacrificed for the greater good? Michael was quiet for a moment, and I could see him recognizing the trap in the question. If he said he decided, he'd be admitting to the control I'd been feeling. If he said we decided together, I could point out that our decision-making process always seemed to result in his preferences winning. We decide together, he said finally, like we always have. When have we ever decided anything together? When have you ever changed your mind based on something I wanted? I'm letting you paint. The guest room blew. After weeks of resistance, and only because you're afraid I might leave if you don't compromise on something? That's not true, isn't it? Michael, when was the last time you genuinely considered that I might be right about something you disagreed with? The question hung between us, unanswerable because we both knew the truth. In Michael's world, disagreement was evidence of my confusion, not a legitimate difference of opinion. I consider your opinions all the time. And how often do they change your mind? They don't need to change my mind if they're wrong. And how do you determine whether they're wrong? By whether they make sense, whether they're based on sound, reasoning, whether they're consistent with our values and goals as a couple, our values and goals, or your values and goals. Sarah, you're twisting this conversation into something it's not. You're trying to make me sound like some kind of tyrant when all I've ever done is love you and try to build a good life with you. I know you love me, Michael, but your love feels like a cage. The words escaped before I could censor them, raw and honest and devastating. Michael's face went white, then red, as if I'd physically struck him. A cage. My love feels like a cage. I wanted to take the words back, to soften them, to find a gentler way to express what I'd been feeling for years. But something about his shock told me he genuinely didn't understand how his protection could feel like imprisonment. Not intentionally. I know you think you're protecting me, caring for me, giving me everything I could want, but Michael, I can't breathe. You can't breathe? In this beautiful home, with every comfort provided for, with a husband who adores you, you can't breathe? I can't make a decision without considering how it will affect your mood. I can't express an opinion without calculating whether it will. Please or displease you. I can't even move a plant without wondering if you'll see it as evidence of rebellion. Because you know how much I value our home, how important it is to me that we maintain the standards we've established together. But what about what's important to me? What about my standards, my values, my vision of how we could live? Your vision? Sarah, you've never expressed a vision of how we could live differently. You've been perfectly happy with the life we've created until this neighbor started filling your head with ideas. I've been perfectly compliant. That's not the same thing as being happy. The distinction seemed to stun him into silence. For all his psychological sophistication, he'd apparently never considered that my lack of protest might indicate fear. Rather than contentment. Compliant, he repeated slowly. You see yourself as compliant rather than collaborative? When was the last time we collaborated on anything? When was the last time you asked what I wanted instead of telling me what you thought was best? I ask your opinion all the time. And when I give it, what happens? We discuss it. We explore the implications. We make the best decision together. We discuss it until I agree with you, or until you understand why your initial reaction might not have been the best approach. Michael, do you hear yourself? You can't imagine a scenario where my opinion might be better than yours, where my instincts might be more accurate, where my preferences might be more valid. That's not true. Then name one time, one decision where you genuinely changed your mind because I convinced you I was right and you were wrong. The silence stretched between us as Michael searched his memory for an example that didn't exist. In his mind, our marriage was a partnership of equals, but the evidence suggested something entirely different. The silence stretched on until it became its own answer. Michael couldn't name a single instance where he genuinely yielded to my judgment because, in his world, such moments didn't exist. I was his beloved project, his carefully curated creation, not his equal partner. "This conversation is pointless," he said finally. "You've already made up your mind to be unhappy, to find fault with everything we've built together. Nothing I say is going to matter because you've decided to see me as the villain in some story about oppressed women. I haven't decided anything, except that I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for your approval." Performing? His voice was incredulous. "Sarah, this is your life, not a performance. These are your choices, your preferences, your natural way of being. In the world. Are they? Or are they the choices and preferences I learned would keep you happy? What's the difference?" The question revealed everything. In Michael's mind, there was no meaningful distinction between what I genuinely wanted and what I'd been conditioned to want. My authentic self and his ideal wife were the same person because he'd never allowed any other version of me to exist. The difference is that one is genuine and one is survival. Survival? You're talking about our marriage like it's some kind of war zone. It is for me. I'm constantly calculating how to avoid conflict, how to maintain peace, how to be the version of myself that won't trigger your disappointment or anger. That's not survival. That's consideration. That's what people do in healthy relationships. Healthy relationships don't require one person to disappear. You haven't disappeared. You're standing right here, expressing opinions, making demands, completely intact as a person. This is the first time in years I've expressed genuine opinions to you. This is the first time I've made demands instead of requests. This is me, trying not to disappear completely. Michael stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion. "What do you want from me, Sarah? What would it take to make you happy?" "I want you to love me enough to let me discover who I am beyond being your wife. And if who you are beyond being my wife is someone who doesn't want to be married to me, then at least we'll both know we tried to build something real, instead of something based on performance and control." Control. He said the word like it tasted bitter. "You really see me as controlling? I see you as someone who needs everything to be perfect, including me. And perfection doesn't leave room for growth or change or authentic choice. I never asked you to be perfect. You didn't have to ask. The consequences of imperfection were clear enough." Michael was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the neighbors' houses where other couples were probably having their own versions of this conversation, or maybe living in the kind of partnership I'd only recently learned to imagine. "I don't know how to love you differently," he said finally, his voice small and lost. "This is the only way I know." The admission broke something open in my chest. This was the truth beneath all his arguments and justifications and psychological maneuvers. He genuinely didn't know how to love someone without controlling them, how to care for someone without managing them. Then maybe we both need to learn new ways of being in relationship. What if I can't learn? What if this is just who I am? Then we'll have to decide if who we are is compatible with who we want to become. That night, I moved into the guest room, not as punishment or protest, but as a way of creating physical space that might allow for emotional breathing room. Michael didn't argue, didn't try to stop me, but I could feel his confusion and hurt radiating through the walls between us. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at walls that were still painted whisper white, and thought about the painting I'd left at. The community center, the woman reaching toward light, surrounded by swirls of color, her face turned upward with hope and determination. 3 months later, I was living in Elena's guest room, attending therapy twice a week, and painting every day. The divorce papers sat on my dresser, unsigned but present. A reminder that some doors once opened can never be fully closed again. Michael and I were trying something we'd never attempted before: honest communication without the goal of changing each other's minds. It was awkward, painful, sometimes impossible, but it was real in a way our marriage had never been. I didn't know if we would find our way back to each other or forward to separate lives. But for the first time in years, I was choosing my uncertainty instead of having it chosen for me. I was painting my truth in bold, unapologetic colors and learning that authenticity was its own kind of freedom. The succulent from my kitchen windowsill sat on Elena's porch now, its leaves reaching confidently toward the morning sun. It had grown beyond all recognition, thriving in the light it had always been seeking. Sometimes I thought of it as a metaphor for my own transformation, but mostly I just appreciated its simple persistence, its refusal to apologize for taking up space in the world. Sarah Chan, 34 years old, was learning to exist without permission, to create without approval, to love herself enough to risk everything for the chance to discover who she might become. The woman I'd been would have found this terrifying. The woman I was becoming found it essential. Some mornings I missed the safety of my cage. But every afternoon, when I stood before a canvas with a brush in my hand and infinite possibilities spreading out before me, I remembered what it felt like to breathe freely, and I painted myself into existence one bold stroke at a time.